Hey, everybody. Welcome into the podcast. We are back with another special bonus episode. I am looking at my co-host, Brad G, right now. We're in the same room together for the first time in a long time.
Yeah. I mean, it has been ages since we recorded together in person. This is a wild place to be, Bob.
We did one episode this season in person. I think we did like Schindler's List in person, which is like, if we're going to get together.
We might as well sob together.
It was a really heavy opportunity to come together. We should have picked something a little lighter.
Yeah. We should have done Wall-E.
Yeah, right. Just about like the pollution of the earth and much lighter fare there. We are coming to you live today from Watershed Distillery in Columbus, Ohio. We're joined by Aaron Harris, who is the head distiller here. Aaron, how are you today?
I'm very well. Thanks, guys, for having me.
No, thanks for being with us. Brad, how long has it been since we have done an on-location distillery interview?
I mean, I think it might have been almost 2 years ago when we were in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Like live at Bardstown Bourbon Company, one of the greatest places ever created.
It was pretty nice.
It was pretty dope. And at Peerless.
Yep.
Yeah, we had great experiences with both places.
I can't imagine like what has prevented us from doing this together for 2 years.
I don't know.
But
yeah.
In any case, we're back at it today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a novelty at this point to be together.
It really is. So we're here to talk with Aaron about Watershed. They've got some incredibly big things happening right now. I mean, they've released 2 new bourbons, which has become their like baseline offerings, replacing what they did before. We've got people getting promoted left and right. I mean, this guy sitting across from me right now, he's the head distiller now. Like this is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, which we always are here on the Film Whiskey Podcast, Watershed is a distillery that's like 45 minutes from my house. I'm up in Delaware, Ohio. I've had their product a few times here and there over the last few years. And to me, I feel like Watershed in a lot of ways, it is on the forefront of the distilling wave in Ohio, right? That like they really have pioneered a lot of the things. And for me, one of the problems with a lot of Ohio whiskeys is that they're all just still pretty young. And I remember some of the early Watershed product, to me, just tasted like it was a little young. It had potential. It had promise. But I am like so freaking pumped to be back here, to see the growth that's happening, to see all the people that they're hiring, to see how they're moving forward into these bottled in bond, these longer age stated whiskeys that I think have a lot of potential.
Yeah. And Aaron, I mean, I guess if we can just start there. I don't want to throw Ohio distilleries under the bus. I know you guys have great working relationships with a lot of other Ohio distilleries, but I look at some other states around the country that are really getting big into the craft distilling market right now. I look at Tennessee, especially, I think is kind of killing it right now. Ohio started doing craft distillery before Tennessee did because of the way the laws changed. And I still feel like Ohio just does not have a footprint in the market to the extent of some of these other states. I mean, if you had to kind of parse out like what's going on with the market here, what are the obstacles that we're facing in Ohio? Like what's keeping us from being a bigger player on that stage?
If I'm being honest, and I think a lot of distillers in Ohio would agree, you have a lot of brewers trying to be distillers and trying to use the same science, same equipment to make gins, vodkas, and whiskeys, and it's just not so. You can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. And as a guy who neither distills nor brews,
I mean, purely a drinker over here.
Right, exactly. I mean, walk me through the differences there. Obviously, I think even like a novice knows that there are huge differences there, but you kind of came up through the ranks as a distiller. So like, what's your own kind of personal scientific background of working with this process? And I guess like how much more preparation does it take to learn how to distill things as opposed to brewing?
Yeah, I think everything is everything in whiskey and making bourbons, making the vodkas, the gins, the cordials, liqueurs. I think it's all about volume. What do you want to sell? Okay, well, you figure out what you want to sell, then you've got to match up your equipment after that. And that's what all these new distilleries have to face. If they can't sell the product, there's no sense in building a huge facility with a big footprint. So getting my start at 1792 Distillery, which when I came in, they were producing between 5 and 6 million proof gallons a year of bourbon. So that really got my feet wet on every single thing possibly involved in producing a spirit, and down from the receiving fresh grains to testing water quality, to testing steam, to understanding all the equipment involved in the processes. You really got to touch everything, and I wouldn't trade that time for anything.
We have you for a while today. We have booked time with Aaron, and I think that
Guys, get ready. This is a 3-hour interview.
we're gonna have an intermission in the middle, so you can get up and pee. We'll
play the Gone with the Wind intermission music.
It's gonna be great. But honestly, like if you're cool with this, I think that we've sat down with a lot of distillers, and a lot of times we get 25 minutes with them, and you're in and you're out, and you hit your talking points, and you're done. But there's a lot of questions that we've gotten from our listeners, and honestly, just from us learning more about the distilling process that I'd love to kind of throw your way if we could nerd out a little bit today.
There's nothing that make me happier than to geek out over whiskey. So
let's do it, man.
I'm totally in. So here's my first question. So White Dog is whiskey that you get just right off the top, right? It hasn't been aged. It's whiskey, but it's not been in a barrel, hasn't touched anything. And you can use that to kind of predict where this whiskey is going to go when it's aged, right?
Yes.
How do you do that? How do you pick out the notes within that White Dog and kind of know, like, oh man, it's going to turn into something?
I mean, because you're essentially drinking moonshine at that point.
Oh yeah,
and it's got to be really hard to distinguish like the flavor characteristics and the compounds going on in there, as opposed to all that great kind of volatile stuff you get from a barrel finished product. So how do you train yourself to sample White Dog and know where it's going from there?
You know, you're geeking me out really quick, because right away if you start comparing anything to moonshine, that's where I'm going to throw up red flags and just say, look, moonshine is a wonderful spirit. It's a heritage spirit that's been created for hundreds of years in this country. So I won't dog it in any way, but it's not the same product we get from White Dog.
Fair.
Because right off the bat with moonshine, you're putting in a ton of sugar, pure sugar. You're putting in a bunch of corn, and you're going for it. Now, obviously, you're going to put your flavor grains in. So you're obviously going to be a sweeter product right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with a bourbon or bourbon forward profile mash bill, you're going to, whatever your flavor grain is, that's your base spirit you're trying to come out with. Your wheated spirits are going to be a little more tame. They're going to be a little more mellow coming through with the White Dog. Rye, it can go two ways. It can be a jams and jellies kind of profile, or it can be really upped on the spice, depending on how much rye you put in your recipe.
So, I mean, when we drink young bourbon, and it's something we tell our listeners all the time, but it's really hard to put it into words. When you drink young whiskey, you know it's young.
You just immediately are like, oh, yep, that's like 2, maybe 3 years.
It's rough around the edges, but it also carries a lot more of that kind of yeasty scent, and you have to try it to know what you're getting into there. But there's a difference between drinking bourbon that's only been aged for like a year and a half and drinking White Dog, which hasn't touched a barrel yet. And I guess, how do you know, okay, these notes that I'm picking up on, which are incredibly young, this just came off the still, these are going to kind of mellow out over time versus these other ones aren't. Yeah.
And, like 100 different people before me have said it. It just depends on what profile you're going after. Higher rye recipes are going to be a much more, in my flavor profile, much more almost salivating flavor in your mouth. It's much more sweeter, much more spice. And if you go the other way, you're going to need a little bit more barrel flavor to kick in, where those heavier ryes don't really need a heavy barrel. They've already got enough to carry themselves most of the time.
All right, so I think it's a good time for us to kind of back up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about your personal history. You've already mentioned that you were at Barton 1792. From there, you went to Lux Row and helped build that out before coming here. Talk about like each stop on your journey. I guess let's go back to Barton.
Elementary school.
Yeah. Your third grade teacher. What was that person like?
And how did it form your whiskey palate?
Yeah, exactly.
So, starting out at Barton's, I was under, the tutelage of long-time distillers and supervisors, and Ken Pierce, who was a chief chemist at 1792, and Tom Moore, who became director of a distillation, who became master distiller before retiring. Then you walk in, John Hargrove, who very quickly was quality manager, then became master distiller, then moved on to what is Bardstown Bourbon now and developing that site. From there, had the opportunity to help build, not from the ground up, but from the point of how are our processes going to work? How are we going from A to Z in the production process? I got to come in at that point, and I got to work with Pete Kamer, who's a longtime distillery designer and a longtime maintenance manager, engineer at Barton Distillery, who went on his own. He's actually got his own hall named after him at Moonshine University, Kamer Hall. So if anybody steps in there, that's Pete's room. He teaches a lot there too. So I got to learn a lot from Pete. As far as big time into the science and the food science and cleaning and keeping things as sanitary as possible. Really, I got a lot of that from John Rimpey, who is our master distiller at Lux Row now. John just has this natural ability to know whether we're headed down the right path or not. And he's got a lot of training in that field. He's still their director of research and development. So he does a lot of stuff. So picking up here and there, that's helped me a lot. I've always been an industrial type of person, constantly doing something, constantly have a project going on. And that's all distilling is. It's one project after another that never stops.
All right. So we're going to just take your life story and use it as the blueprint for how to become successful in distilling. Because we all know there's not many paths. There's one path, and it's the path that Aaron took. So we're just going to go ahead and narrow in on this. But seriously, like if you wanted to get into, like, I'm intrigued by the idea of distilling. If I wanted to eventually become a distiller at, an established place and not just my bathtub, like, what's the process that you took? I mean, did you go to school? Like, were you a chemist at some point? Like, how did you work your way through the ranks? What initially attracted you to it?
Well, what initially attracted me to the business was my wife, who lived in Bardstown. She's born and raised there, and I moved there to be with her, and we started our lives there. And I randomly applied for a position at the local distillery, and it happened to be a second shift, swing shift to third distillery supervisor position. They made it very clear to me that I was going to have a very crappy schedule, but I was going to learn a lot, and I did. From then on, it was learn everything you can, pick up everything you can, listen to every person who's long in the tooth and long gray hair. You listen to every story they have, because they're going to have the secrets that all these engineers and chemists are trying to figure out in their labs, whereas it could be just go turn a valve. And a lot of times in those union environments, they don't give up information quickly unless they like you. Thank God they liked me. I gave away a lot of free food and did as much as I could. But no, my background is business. I graduated with my business degree from Indiana State University. So that has helped me develop any kind of organizational skills or communicating from different walks of life, especially in the distilling world. When you've got people who are delivering your trucks, or trucks of corn or case goods to your customers coming in from all the agencies or liquor outlets looking to buy barrels, you've got to communicate with all levels. And I've always been able to do that very well. And, I hold true to, every stranger is a friend you haven't met yet. So I think that has helped me out a lot. And, most of my former employees would say that we're more like family now than even friends or coworkers. So that's generally how I like to keep things.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but like seriously, we'll make this a true or false here. But like the vibe I get from the distilling industry, especially the whiskey distilling industry, is, did you ever see that movie Glory with Matthew Broderick and Denzel? Yeah. There's this whole like subsection of the movie that these guys don't respect Matthew Broderick because he's an officer that went to West Point and he didn't really earn his stripes on the field. And so the whole like, is he going to win these guys' trust? I think that like the bourbon industry especially seems like one of the last places where truly like you got to earn your stripes. You got to work your way up. There aren't a lot of like West Point officers. The people that have achieved that rank have done it by scrubbing out like the Vendome here and there. I mean, I see your face. So like, fill me in. Like, where do you stand on this?
So, in recent years, you've got Moonshine University that's become very popular. You have just recently, last year, I think this is maybe the second or third year for the James B. Beam Institute at University of Kentucky. So you have a lot of distilleries who are trying to give some sort of education back into the education world to try to prepare them to have more distillers, to have more engineers, to have more QC personnel, and to let people know that there are jobs in this ever-growing business we're in. And a lot of times, just because they have those certifications, sometimes they think that means that they know everything and they're going to be fine.
You mean college kids sometimes think that they know everything?
I don't know why they think that. But, a lot of times, if you can, the biggest thing that was always told to me was, if you can just get in the business, it doesn't matter where you start. That's the biggest hurdle to face, because then it's your own accord that gets you from point A to point B, because in this business, what you do is however much you put in is what you get out. And I've held to that.
All right. So one of the perks of being head distiller must be that you can just text somebody while we're sitting here at the table and they will just bring in product for you to try. So
yes.
Can you walk us through what just got set in front of us by by one of your underlings here?
The strapping gentleman, Sam McCollum, just dropped in some white dog that's actually coming off the still right now.
Wow.
Should be coming off the still between 135 and 138 proof. This is our rye bourbon. So I did taste it. You can even tell it's just a little warm. Should be coming off around 90 degrees. There's a little bit of a fruity note to it. I don't get a whole lot of grain forward on it, which
I don't either.
I'm looking for a pretty good balance there.
I want to see, Brad, what's the fruit note you're getting on this? Because I have a very particular one in mind.
Cherry.
I'm not getting cherry. I'm like, do you remember when you were a little kid and you got those like tiny little cardboard boxes of Sun-made raisins in your lunchbox? Yeah. This is like raisin all day for me. And I just we have a thing on the podcast where I go back into my fat kid memory and like pull out all the little different types of Little Debbie notes that I can get on something. So for me, it's Sun-made raisins.
Yeah. No, I actually, now that I say it,
let's throw over to our sponsor, Sun-made raisins.
The power of suggestion
for your fat kid.
No, I swear to you, we started this fermenter somewhere around 12 o'clock today, and my first shift operator brought me over a sample just to make sure I was okay with it and there's nothing, goofy about it. And it was actually, I said it was fine. It's different. And my key was it's chewy raisin.
Oh, boom. Yeah.
And I'm coming for you, man. I will get him back here if I have to get him to say that's what I said. So.
That's awesome. All right. So let's walk through the idea of this white dog then, because honestly, Brad, we have not been given the level of access in a lot of places that we are already being granted here at Watershed. One of the things
that's what happens when you have corporate sponsors like Sun-Made Raisins.
Like Sun-Made Raisins.
It'll get you in a lot of places.
This whole thing for us. One of the concepts that I kind of want to dive into for our listeners that we've never gone into is this idea of when you pull things off the still and the heads and the tails specifically. And this is a concept of the first things that kind of come through the still are the heads and the last things are the tails. And you have some really wonky flavors on each end of that spectrum. So you have to try to hit the right balance of how much do you include of both, as opposed to that kind of middle section, which is the golden juice. Walk us through that. How do you start to train your own palate of how much heads, how much tails? What do you discard as it comes through the still? Is it specific to each still, or how does that work?
I will say it is very site specific. And the ease of proof coming off, or ease of even tails, heads, hearts coming off has a lot to do with your equipment. It also has a lot to do with your energy sources. If you don't have enough steam to blow off a lot of the bad we don't want, the non-condensables, the congeners, any of the undesirables we don't want, then they're going to be in your whiskey, and there's nothing you can do about it after it's already in the barrel. A lot of times people will say the solution to pollution is dilution, but it doesn't really work for you in the barrel. With what we have here, so we have two stills. We have our Kota, Kothe pot still. It's a hybrid pot. And then we also have our head frame still that is manufactured out of Montana. With the head frame, it runs much more like a column still. We can pull our low wines off much easier. Mm-hmm. There's not a whole lot of heads we have to worry about. Those are vented off.
Right.
With the Kota, that's a little bit different. That is when you have to bring in your art and your experience. The guys that have been doing it forever know when to cut from heads and go to hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a headsy flavor is sometimes very medicinal, sometimes antiseptic flavors, nothing you want to taste. Sometimes we may go through 20 to 60 liters of product coming off before we call it heads. Now, it's nothing we throw away. At that point, we can sometimes redistill that separately to do what we can with it. If we feel like it's there's nothing promising, we will dump it, but responsibly. But as far as low wines go, you're going to think of like really funky cheese smells, nothing you want.
Right.
So it sounds like it's right up Bob's alley then.
You might like it.
We've got a running joke, especially with Willet products. Like the word I always use is funk. So yeah, I mean, we're gonna talk about funk. We can get right into it.
Okay. And a lot of times with low wines too, we can judge all that on proof. Especially, we get to a certain point, we cut it off and we put it to tails and we put it back in raw material for us.
All right, so we're like getting pretty far into the weeds here, and my question for you, Aaron, is this: Are you ready? What is like your favorite part of the distilling process? Or maybe not even the distilling process, but like the entire whiskey process, from like planting the grain to like pouring it out of the bottle.
He's not a farmer, dude. Like planting the. What do you think? He's like hoeing rows behind the distillery
from the start of the idea of what whiskey is to the very time when you're pouring it out of the finished bottle. Like, what is your favorite part? It could be something sciencey. It could be some of the tasting elements. Like, what do you just love? Do you think is really cool about the process of distilling whiskey?
So it's a really good thing to love the production aspect. But when you've been at a location so long that you get to actually have put it in the barrel and be able to harvest that barrel to taste what you've done 4 years later or however long you're doing it, that's really the only full satisfaction you get when you're distilling.
Yeah.
So I was at Barton Distillery for 3 years. I was at Lux Row for almost 3.5.
Yeah. So you're like on the cusp.
I hope maybe we get to 4 years here. I don't know. So we'll see what the future holds. I hope so. I'm really loving it. But that is like that's one of those things I've been chasing. But for me, so far in my career, it's been as I'm distilling it and we pull our samples off of our stills and someone says, I've never tasted White Dog so good, or I've never had it palatable, something that I can actually feel like doesn't need a barrel. And that's all I've gotten, and that's what I've chased in my career. So,
well, I'll tell you what, man. This isn't just me hearing you say that and trying to like boost your ego. This White Dog is the only one that I've ever had where I was like, oh, that tastes good.
Yeah, we actually, gosh, I'm not going to say the name of the company. We had a company that sent us, along with their finished stuff, a bottle of their White Dog just to have on air with the person that we tried. And like, I have heard people talk about drain pours before.
Yep.
That was the only whiskey I've ever had that I legitimately was like, there is no use for this, and I don't know what to do with it except for pour it out.
Ooh, can I trash a company?
No.
Oh, shoot.
Okay.
I've had a drain pour.
Really?
It was on the podcast.
Is it somewhere he worked? Because I don't know if it's...
No, not at all. It was
best bottle I've ever had.
One of the coolest bottles I've ever had. It was a drain pour.
Real bad stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to make the episode. But
I was going to say, I'm not opening my mouth on this.
Yeah, you're good. All right, so let's transition a little bit into talking about Watershed as a distillery. So you've been here, what, a year now?
Finished since March 1st.
March 1st. All right, so
We're
just
coming up on
months.
6 months.
I guess, well, first of all, how are you acclimating to the Columbus area?
So I've been with my wife for over 6 years now, and we have 3 children. So we have a 5-year-old who just started kindergarten, and we have a 3-year-old that's starting preschool, and we have a 6-month-old.
Hey,
so
congrats, man.
Thank you. We are adjusting fairly well. The only way my wife would move from her hometown was if she didn't have to work. So I called her bluff. So now she doesn't have to work. She's doing her dream gig of being a stay-at-home mom and taking care of our family, and she does a fantastic job. of it. So the adjustment has been really well. This is actually my second stint in Columbus. I was here for about a year in 2010. I won't lie, it was rough. There were some rough years there, rough months. And then I moved on to different positions. But coming back, this has been a very welcoming return. I won't call it a homecoming, but it's a return. We're actually loving it so far.
That's awesome, man. So when it comes to Watershed itself, I always wonder this when someone comes in that wasn't here from the start. Like, you were not necessarily involved in the creation of the mash bill, and I know the mash bill has changed over time. I guess my first question then is, when you are going from one distillery to the next distillery, and you're being called upon to bring like your expertise to bear, like you are the head distiller now, how much of it is like, hey, we are trusting your palate to kind of shape where the flavor profile of this brand goes? And how much of it is like, hey, we have a flavor profile, you're here to keep it consistent?
So one of the first questions to be asked of me when I had interviewed up here from an interviewer was, are there any one-off specialties you want to do? Are there any finishings you want to do? I said, no, I'm not really coming here for fads. I'm here to come and create a consistent flavor, a consistent day in and day out drink that we can be proud of, that we can put on shelves day in and day out. And, that can be our workhorse. And then we can do the fun stuff, because at the time, I don't know if there quite was one, especially in the bourbon market for us at Watershed. So I have been given full authority over our flavor profile and where it's going.
Well, that's awesome. Congrats on that.
Yeah.
I guess my follow-up then is like, so as you are coming up through the ranks at Barton, let's say, and you're learning like what is good that's coming off the stills here, what's a sign of like good Barton product? I think anyone who's had 1792, anyone who's had Barton products knows there's like a very specific flavor profile there. How do you learn how to distinguish what is just good whiskey versus what is good Barton whiskey, or like good in this flavor profile? Because then you go to Lux Row, and I think you guys had two mash bills basically there that you kind of work out of at Lux Row. Both really good. I like the wheated one a lot. And then you come here and it's a different mash bill as well. How do you kind of carry your own personal like flavor profile preferences from place to place and not find yourself just falling back on like, oh, I'm just making Barton product again? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of it is, I'll come back to volume. A lot of it is, what do you want to make? Because if you want to do all these specialty, if you want to do these heritage grains, and if you want to do like a blue corn, or you want to do the Bloody Butcher corns, a lot of those don't have great yield. There's a reason why number 2 yellow dent corn is the main corn used for bourbon production in this country, because it's the highest yielding. It's fairly cheap, not right now, but it's usually fairly cheap. And it creates the greatest yield for your recipe. So if you want a high rye product, most of your sugars is going to come from that rye, which naturally doesn't have a lot of sugar. So you're going to sacrifice what you want to make versus a yield. And you've got to kind of understand that. So a lot of times, if my client or my ownership party wants to tell me what they want to make, then everything has to be planned out according to what they want, because you can't expect the same yield from 70% corn versus 45% corn or 20% corn. It's just not going to happen.
Right. Well, I mean, coinciding with you coming on board here, Watershed has really kind of revamped almost everything about their bourbon lineup. Like, we have a new product here that has basically supplanted what was on the shelf before. We have upped it to a 4-year whiskey now. You have a bottled and bond bourbon. You also have a 4-year bourbon that is finished in apple brandy barrels. And those have become like the baseline offerings from Watershed now. That's a big deal. I mean, you're jumping from what was essentially, I think, a 2-year product to a 4-year product, and having to maintain putting out 4-year product now and not being able to fall back on that younger stuff. Has the company felt that transition from like, all right, we have our younger stuff, and now we have this older stuff, to now it's only 4-year stuff? That's a big deal. That's a huge jump up in age statement.
Yeah, it's a big point of pride for the company. I haven't been here for the production of all of it, but I've witnessed just in these short 6 months a huge transformation, and a big part of that is buy-in. if your people want to keep moving forward and, onwards and upwards, if that's what they want to do, they're going to carry your company to that level. And so far we are doing that, and we are equipping the company to do that. It's a company that's trying to grow in an area where it's not, this isn't bourbon country. This is from what I understand, this is beer country and gin country. They produce a lot of both. And there's not a blueprint. There's not a big blueprint. We're the oldest distillery in the area. So, as if we are to set the example and the mold for how it's to be done, we're going to do it right. And our product is there finally of age for us to keep that, movement forward.
All right. So we've talked about Watershed a little bit. We've gotten a little bit about where we've been. I want to know where we're at. So right now, I'm literally looking at your new flagship workhorse. This is going to be the product that you sell. Bourbon. It's aged 4 years. It's finished in apple brandy barrels. It's a blend of straight bourbon whiskeys. So talk to me about a few of those things. Like, what made you guys decide on apple brandy barrels? What made you choose the specific blend that you are choosing here? Where did you guys come out with this product? And what made you give the stamp of approval and say, this is what we want to represent Watershed Distillery?
Well, and as we talk about that, Brad, can we pour this out? Because you're just waving it in my face at this point. I want to hear this bottle pop too. Oh, that was a close call, my friend. Yeah, please jump in. Yeah.
So, like we said, this is our flagship bourbon. This is, for all our purposes, this is going to be our standard bourbon coming through. We knew our percentages were going to be sourced product. So there's 4-year sourced product in there. There's our own 4-year product. To release this, sometimes you just need the volume and the flavor profile we're going after. And we knew we wanted to incorporate Ohio because we are immensely supportive of our local area, local community in the state. So with that apple finish, we get that little hint of fruit. I don't always get the apple, to be honest. I think it takes a few sips to catch it, but when you do catch it, it's very, very rewarding and really complements our bourbon.
Yeah, I think it's much closer to being like an apple peel than a bite of applesauce or something. You know what I mean? It's not like a cinnamon apple. It's not necessarily like a Granny Smith, but it just kind of has the the essence of an apple peel to me.
Eau de apple.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good.
So in addition to this 4-year apple brandy finish, we also have the Bottled and Bond 4-year, which I love the difference in the bottle shape and design as well. So you definitely know which one you're drinking here, which is helpful for us because we've tried 8 samples of things already now, Brad. So can you walk us through the development of the Bottled and Bond and what exactly are we looking at here?
It's really my favorite product because it is you putting in a bottle your distillery. We are showcasing our work. Mm-hmm. I say our work because I have been a part of it towards the end of its development, but it's the work of Watershed Distillery over the past 4 years. Bottled and Bond is a guarantee of certification. It's one of the first Consumer Protection Acts, started in 1897. This was a remedy by the U.S. government and distillers at the time to rid the market of false goods, of false spirits. There was gasoline and spirits trying to be hawked. So this was a way to guarantee the product.
I mean, they were putting cocaine in Coca-Cola back then, so
yeah. What's a little gasoline here and there?
Yeah, come on now.
Got to keep up with the times. So anything with this stamp of approval since 1897 is aged 4 years. It's aged in the same location. It's aged at the location it was distilled in. All the barrels were of the same season, the same production season. So there's about 10 different specs that's got to make. But the gist of it, those are the 3 big parts of that. To be included in this batch, we probably had 70 barrels to pick from. The first batch was 10 barrels. So narrowing. First of all, we had the plethora of good barrels to choose from, but we wanted to go after a unique and a little bit at 100 proof. We wanted something that was going to complement that proof, and we think we did it. we it was the first project as far as using my talents I was able to be a part of, and it definitely holds a place, dear to me. As far as notes go, you're gonna get a few of the same notes you got in our 4-year bourbon, but I'd love to hear what you guys think about it.
Well, I will say, so just confirm for me here, like everything in here is Watershed distillate, right? This is, okay, nothing sourced in this. Immediately, this is a much more like darker, sweeter kind of nose to me. This has a ton of brown sugar. I get a little bit of nuttiness on this as well. It doesn't necessarily have that like Jim Beam nuttiness to it, but it has that kind of like peanut buttery scent to it. Brad, this is, for me, this is the best thing from Watershed I've ever had. And I like Watershed product, but this, I cannot express to you how much of a major leap forward these two products represent for this company.
Yeah, I mean, for long-term listeners of the podcast, I came here and interviewed Josh Gandy a few years ago, tried some of their product, and I remember being in a place, like I said at the start of this episode, where I was impressed, but it felt like there was work that needed to be done. And I feel like I can officially announce to you the work has been done. Watershed, a few years later, is at a point where, Bob, I'm right there with you. This is decently complex. It has a lot of different things going on for it, but the flavor is something that I could drink any day of the week. Mm-hmm. It's something that I really, really enjoy, that I would want neat at any point. And it's a product that they've made it. They have arrived. Been announced. Yeah. Watershed has arrived. I would really genuinely call this one of the first, probably the first Ohio whiskey I've had where I just said, damn, that is good whiskey.
Well, and it's not even just that it's good whiskey, but we've talked about Ohio as a place that hasn't really announced itself on the map of bourbon making, which still, I mean, even after your explanation, blows my mind. Like, if you've driven through Ohio, it is like corn in 3 cities. And so we have all of the raw materials to make really good bourbon here. And I feel like for a long time, it's been Watershed and then everybody else when it comes to distilling in terms of, volume and distribution and just marketing. And I feel like now the product has really, really caught up to that, to the point where like Ohio whiskey is on the map with these two products now.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, honestly, like, Aaron, that's got to excite you coming on here, recognizing that they're already on the right path and they've brought you on to kind of, I don't know, keep the ship in the right direction at this point.
Yes. That would be, I don't know if that was exactly the words Greg Lehman, our founder, used, but it was guidance as far as, really in the full entire production process. My foundation is from Barton with 100 years of distilling experience instilled into me. So that guidance, guides me and guides, all the production moves we're making at the moment. So that helps.
Well, I want to kind of steer us into a different direction. We always, when we do these interviews, we lean into the film aspect of film and whiskey. So we're going to talk a little bit about Aaron's favorite movie. And while we do that, we're going to sip on an even more allocated product here. We're talking about their 6 to 8 year limited release barrel strength, which you're going to be doing batch 2 starting here in, I think, just a few weeks, right?
It will be released at the distillery, I believe, on September 18th.
Oh, man.
Now, I remember seeing last year on Instagram, there were lines like around the block to get this stuff. And I remember, like, of course, being the lazy guy I am, I was like, in Akron, Ohio, I was like, oh, I'd love to go down there and try to get a bottle of this. And then the next day I saw the people lined up and I was like, they're good. They can, So I feel very, very privileged to have this batch 2. We just had Ann Dimmick, who is the barrel master, come in here and pour a sample for us. I wish, that we could have her on the podcast, but she did tell us before she left, I think we're the first 2 people to publicly try batch 2.
I think to ever try. I don't think they've even tried it.
I don't.
It's just us.
He's the master distiller, but he's never. There's no quality control here at Watershed.
He just knows.
Yeah. I will say it has not been shared on this site yet.
That's incredible. So,
first off, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your
Holy
hospitality.
Cow.
But as we talk about your favorite movie, we're going to be sipping on this. So last year it was 6-year age stated. I believe, just based on how laws work, it will still be 6-year age stated. But the whiskey that's in the bottle is between 6 and 8 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. At least 4 years age is at least 4 years in char 5 new charred oak barrels, and then we finish it for between 32 and 45 months on each of those barrels.
Wow. All right, so Aaron, this is the moment I've been waiting for, because we finally get to get you out of the elevator pitch of sharing the same information 1,000 times, and we're going to talk about something that hopefully you've never talked about on a podcast before, which is your favorite film. So please throw it at us. What is your favorite movie? What are we going to be talking about today?
The Shawshank Redemption.
Now, I don't know if I've ever heard of that movie.
Is that right?
Can you familiarize me with that?
We're in Ohio. How about that?
Right.
Aaron explains.
Andy Dufresne.
Oh, that was a great Morgan Freeman. We're
amazing.
off to a good start here.
So, that movie, no matter how many times I watch it, it doesn't matter what moment the movie's at, if I catch it, it's not so much, it's about a good guy in a bad situation, toughing it out and sticking it to the man, and in the end, getting some kind of redemption on his life taken away and being happy. And I think that's a goal for everyone. I think it's got many lessons for persevering any adversities affecting your life. I also think there's a lot of wisdom shared in that movie that anybody can learn from.
So we did an episode on Shawshank a couple seasons ago. I think it was one of our season 1 selections.
It was either season 1 or 2.
So I will say, don't go back and listen to it. Season 1 was rough for the Film and Whiskey podcast, but
it was a period of growth.
Absolutely. But we do have a very deep connection to Shawshank. I mean, it was filmed in Ohio, not too far up the road here at Mansfield Reformatory. They had a huge celebration for the 25th anniversary a couple years ago.
That we didn't get invited to.
We did not get invited. We tried to get media credentials, but we were a new podcast and we had like 50 listeners. So they very, very rightfully so did not offer us media credentials. However, I will say, like, you mentioned something about how it doesn't matter what point you come into the movie at. I remember when we talked about Shawshank that one of our main points was it is the perfect cable TV movie because it really does kind of operate episodically. There is a chapter and then that chapter closes and it fades out and you go to commercial and you come back and you watch another little bit of it. It is the amount of Saturday afternoons watching AMC or TBS showing the Shawshank Redemption that I have had in my life. It's perfect for that kind of episodic structure you get on cable TV.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, what you have with Shawshank is a movie that it dives deep into what does it mean to be a good person in a place where you have just been wronged, right? And so you look at Andy Dufresne and you see somebody who has been wronged, who is in a place where the deck is stacked against him. And how does he respond to that? How does he move through that? And what does that say about him as a human being? And I think that's what really connects people to him as a character, to the movie as a whole. But I'm genuinely curious, what do you feel like, Aaron, connects you to the movie? What draws you back time and time again?
I think just seeing the way how he's so calculated with every relationship. I won't say that I'm calculated with my relationships in my life, but I have a very close circle. And I'm sure anyone that I have wronged in my life, I try to make amends for. So there's some kind of, I don't know if there's some kind of psychological effect that some people may have on that type of a story where they can relate so many of their life events, however ugly they may be, to a lot of events in that movie, and hopefully learning how to cope or learning how to move forward from a lot of those events.
Right before we started recording, Aaron shared with me that he is not very good at picking favorites when it comes to things, which really freaked me out because these are my favorite movie type things. But he was pretty adamant about loving The Shawshank Redemption. And I got to ask you a couple more favorites before we let you go for the day here. Favorite scene in the movie? Like, if there is one scene that's on TV and you happen to stumble upon it, you're like, yes, I didn't miss this one.
There's a lot that are really good and riveting, but when Red finally goes to the wall in the hayfield in Maine, and he finds the box, finds the black stone that has no business being in a Maine hayfield, and there's a turn in his life where he's like, well, what am I doing? I'm going to just go do whatever Andy's got laid out for me and take this trip and have a leap of faith for a friend and some happiness. And And he does it. And there's a classic line that says, you get busy living or get busy dying. And, it doesn't matter what you're doing, what stage in life, that's the way to go.
Absolutely.
Bob, do you have a favorite scene that you?
No, I mean,
just can't
any
pass
scene
up
that
on?
Morgan Freeman is narrating is automatically my favorite scene.
I think for me, one of my favorite scenes from that movie is when he finally, it's not that he's standing up to him, but when he offers his financial acumen as a service to the prison guard. They're up on the roof and they're like tarring the roof. And he like stands up and he has to like put himself out there because the guard's like ready to throw him off the freaking building, right? Like the way he puts himself out there, like for me, that's like a turning point in the movie where Andy, he's always had a plan, but this is the point where the plan, you see him start to move
Comes
forward.
to fruition, yeah.
Yeah, and that for me, that's a scene for me that I just can't put down.
So going back to the scene you were referring to, I love the ending of the movie. I want to hear your guys' take on this, though. There's part of me, I love seeing the cathartic ending of the two of them on the beach, you know what I mean? And they embrace as the camera pulls up in the helicopter. It's great. There's part of me that almost wishes they had ended it with the bus pulling away and Morgan Freeman talking about like, I hope that the ocean is as blue as it's been in my dreams. And you just have that last little moment of like, I hope.
Yeah.
Because like that's the central theme of the movie is finding hope in situations that you don't know the outcome of. And even at that point, Red doesn't know if he's going to reunite with Andy.
Yeah.
And I think like that's the ending of the movie. And I love that they gave us the catharsis of seeing them reunited. Part of me wishes they had just left it on that kind of ambiguous note. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's anything past that point, it gets on the bus is a cherry on top. It really is. But also, I think they just kind of closed the book on it. I don't think they I'm not wanting any more. They're both. You visually see that they're both happy.
Yeah,
probably happy.
And I was gonna say, I think that for the amount of torment and torture and just horrific stuff that happens to Andy, I feel like it's almost needed. Not even just for the viewer, but for Andy as a character to have the catharsis of knowing that he made it out.
Right.
That is necessary. I'm not disagreeing with you though, Bob. I think it would be fascinating if they ended it with Red on the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not to segue into a different movie, but what's in the box?
Yeah.
What's in the box?
What is
we don't
in the
know.
box?
But we don't ever see what's in the box. But Morgan Freeman again, another Morgan Freeman movie. What we really need is just a mashup of Seven and Shawshank Redemption.
That would be a heck of a movie.
Right.
Set in the 90s or 1960.
You never know.
You just, all the people that tormented Andy, their heads just end up in a box somewhere. And that's...
No, on the beach. He just has them on like luau.
Just like coconuts.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
Well, before we let you go today, I do want to comment on this 6 to 8 year barrel proof entry. Man,
Bob,
this thing...
I just want you to be quiet for a second.
Yeah.
This thing is freaking delicious.
It's really, really good.
like,
I see why people line up around the block here.
yeah, there is a depth of flavor and quality. The apple for me is really coming out here. This is a whiskey that I would keep on a shelf away from my friends. like I want this one for me.
We have broken things down into those kind of tiers before of whiskeys you get selfish about. Like whiskeys you want to share because they're really good, and then whiskeys that's like, I don't want anyone to take 2 ounces out of this whiskey.
Yep. And then there's the whiskeys that are big names that you want to give away because you're like, oh yeah, try this really cool, great whiskey.
Well, and I think the great thing about coming and visiting Watershed today is reasserting that what they're doing here, what they're working toward here, is something that Ohio whiskey especially has never seen before.
Yeah.
They have really announced themselves on the national stage here with these products. And I know that the distribution isn't quite national yet, but as it continues to pick up more states, if you see Watershed product on the shelf, I mean, you have a wholehearted recommendation, I think, from both of us for both their 4-year products and also this single barrel 6 to 8 year.
Yeah, two thumbs up. I mean, if this were an Ebert review, I'd probably give it 3.5 to 4 stars.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is hitting a place where you go, holy cow, this isn't just good Ohio whiskey. This is good whiskey. This is at a place where I want to share it with my friends. I want to tell people about it. I want to say, hey, like I got to go do an interview at Watershed Whiskey. You need to get their stuff.
Yeah.
So, Aaron, we've talked a little bit about, where this company has been, where it's at now. I want to talk just briefly as we close here about where it's going. So, whatever you've been authorized to share, if you have breaking news, we're happy to break your news for you here. But I mean, what's in the future here? What is something that you're excited for as you kind of work towards these new? I'm sure you guys are working on new releases. We've already seen this jump to a 4-year whiskey. We've seen the 6-year whiskey now. What's down the road a little bit here that you guys are continuing to work towards?
To segue back, or not to segue, but to review my last comment on as far as what we want to produce. Obviously, I want like we said, the workhorse. We want our consistency. We want our consistent bourbon flavor to push on and to represent us very well. But we're in Ohio, where there's a lot of unique products that we very much thoroughly enjoy putting into our products. So as far as old fashioned, we use fresh Ohio cherries. As with our apple brandy, we only use Ohio apples. And the Nocino, which is an Italian liqueur with a base vodka spirit. We put in approximately 150 gallons of vodka to about 550 pounds of walnuts, something like that. So it's fresh chopped walnuts. These never hit the ground. They're picked from the tree, local.
And you're chopping the walnuts by hand yourself.
We don't do it with a knife anymore. We do have a chopper, but it's fairly labor intensive. And we will age that for 6 to 10 months, something like that. It turns, characteristically black color, and it is full of, only thing I can determine to say is it's full of Christmas. It's a very delicious pour as far as our Nocino. Now
I will say, we were literally just in the warehouse an hour ago, and they were pouring it out, and he pulled samples literally as it was pouring out. And it was breathtaking.
Oh, absolutely great. We had a product on the show a couple years ago, and I don't mean to throw attention to a different company right now, but we had a product from Old Dominic called their bourbon toddy or something.
Yeah, it was like a hot toddy.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. The spice profile, very similar there. It has those great wintry kind of spice notes to it. Lots of clove, lots of, cinnamon, lots of nutmeg.
You know what would go really great in?
What's that?
Hartzler's eggnog.
Hartzler's eggnog. We have for 3 episodes in a row, we have talked about Hartzler's eggnog.
We just got to keep it going, man. Aaron, I'm curious. Have you tried Hartzler's eggnog at this point?
I have never been an eggnog fan, but I'm willing to try.
Does your wife or kids like it? Is it?
No.
Oh, wow.
We're going to have to get you to try
Hard sell.
In any case, the Nocino is, it's incredible. It is it's decadent. The consistency is almost syrupy. Like, I've heard people talk about pouring it over ice cream. It is the perfect topper for some kind of dessert like that.
Dude, I could see it on a piece of cheesecake.
Man.
Oh, man.
And don't forget to add it into your next batch of chocolate chip cookies or oatmeal cookies.
Holy cow.
That you are opening up new worlds of possibility.
Anybody over 200 pounds is going to try that. I'm telling you.
I fit that category.
Yes. Now, with that, this year we have decided to try something different. So we have, instead of using our base spirit as being vodka, we have experimented. It's in the works right now. It's in the warehouse. Our base spirit is 4-year aged bourbon.
So you're using the old adage, everything is better with whiskey.
It has to be.
That's right.
It better be. So we feel that's going to be an excellent offering to showcase our Nocino profile, and we can't wait to dump those that batch.
Well, Aaron, we can't thank you enough for taking the time. You guys have poured out. Honestly, I feel like we have walked through the making of bourbon from its infancy with the White Dog all the way up to the 6 to 8 years.
You mean with the grain that Aaron himself planted?
We're just chewing on stalks of corn. Right. Seriously, though, we can't thank you enough for the hospitality that you all have offered us here. Thank you for plugging. I can't wait for this Nocino. The base spirit is whiskey.
I'll be buying it as soon as it's on the shelf.
100%.
Yeah.
If you see Watershed on the shelf, do not even spare a second thought. Grab it. Go. Like, it is incredible. This place is going to do some very big things, and we are so excited as Ohioans to be able to bring this to you.
Yeah, we don't talk about it a ton on the podcast, but Ohio is the promised land.
It's just better than everywhere else ever has been.
It's the greatest state in the union. I've been to all the famous ones. I've been to California and Colorado and, the places people talk about, Florida. But Ohio is the place to be. And I think Watershed is one of the reasons why. So genuinely, like Bob just said, if you see Watershed on the shelf at your local liquor store, go grab it. And encourage them to get into more places. What is your footprint right now? What states can people get you in?
Right now, so, a 10-year, we've been in the business for 10 years. Our 4-Peel gin is solidly in, I believe, our 7-state market. And then with the bourbon, we hope to reach as far as with Florida, Georgia, D.C., Michigan, Kentucky, I believe Virginia. So we're kind of just around us and straight down. We're trying to reach some of those markets, depending on what distribution we can get picked up. But onwards and upwards, so we hope to bring it near you.
Well, this has been Aaron Harris. He is the head distiller here at Watershed Distillery in Columbus, Ohio. We'll be back on Monday with another regularly scheduled episode, but until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.